There was something deeply unconvincing about peace. It had the smell of recycled air and cheap instant coffee, tasted like unresolved diplomatic tension, and sounded an awful lot like bored soldiers arguing over interstellar sports scores. Captain Elias Reese didn't trust it one bit. He stood at the edge of the outpost's observation deck, hands wrapped around a dented thermos that had once survived a plasma blast. The stars above Terrace 4 twinkled with the kind of clarity you only got in disputed sectors, places too politically radioactive for heavy traffic, but just stable enough to justify someone like him being stationed there, patrolling a peace he didn't believe in. The war had ended 3 years ago, or at least that's what the brass kept insisting. They called it an armistice, as if that word could erase what had happened, as if it could unstitch memories of screaming through smoke, of ships burning like second suns. Elias had been a ground captain during the final battles against the Varelian Concord, and he'd seen things. Too many things with too many limbs and too much rage. But not her, not Kailari. He didn't know she existed until she walked off the diplomatic cruiser like she owned every square meter of space she touched. Her file had arrived 2 days before she did. Kailari Sienvek, Varelian Cultural Liaison. Combat rank, Duskblade Prime, security clearance, high but not blow up a moon high. There was a blurry image included, taken from what appeared to be a very nervous intern's shaky drone, enough to make out her angular jaw, her obsidian-hued armor, and the pair of long, upward-curving ears that arched behind her head like elegant, alien antlers. Varelians looked human, almost unnervingly so, but for the ears, the pale, iridescent skin, and the crystalline growths that emerged along their spines and clavicles, like nature had tried to make jewelry sentient. Kalari's eyes were a pale violet, cold and calculating, with pupils that adjusted to light like camera lenses. Her presence was sharp. That was the only word Elias had for it, like standing too close to a blade that hadn't decided whether or not to cut you. "Try not to get stabbed," Lieutenant Ferris had muttered, elbowing Elias in the ribs as the alien emissary descended the landing ramp. "You know the Varelians, always a coin flip between peace talks and disembowelment." "Reassuring," Elias murmured, setting his thermos aside. "Remind me to put that on the welcome banner." Kalari didn't speak when she arrived. She didn't need to. She scanned the hangar with those crystalline eyes, lips set in a line thinner than a wire. Everyone else shuffled, saluted, or averted their gaze. Elias didn't move. Not out of courage. He just had coffee in his hand and no immediate desire to be scalded. She approached him with that predator's smooth glide, armor whispering against itself, and stopped exactly 3 feet away. Varelians were big on personal space. Their culture guide listed it somewhere between "do not touch their ears" and "avoid offering compliments unless you enjoy being glared at for hours." "Captain Reese," she said, voice calm and clipped, her standard laced with a faint, melodic accent that made the word captain sound like something carved into marble. "I was informed you would be my human liaison. I request immediate access to local intelligence and the coordinates of all non-diplomatic weapon caches within a 3-kilometer radius." "Good morning to you too," Elias replied, sipping his coffee. "And don't worry, I only keep my unregistered weaponry in the break room." Something flickered in her expression, almost like amusement, but it died before it could reach her eyes. They walked together through the outpost main corridor, a relic of pre-war construction with more rust than metal, and a suspicious smell near the kitchen vents that no one dared investigate. Kailari said little, observing everything with the kind of intensity usually reserved for surgeons and predators. Elias made small talk because silence made him itch. "So, how do Varelians unwind?" he asked casually. "Humans do things like listen to music, get drunk, scream into pillows, eat excessive quantities of sugar." "I sharpen my blades," she said, "or run combat simulations at increased gravity settings." "Wow. And here I thought I was intense for keeping an indoor punching bag." She looked at him sideways. "Do you name it?" "Yeah, general bureaucracy." That finally earned a faint curve at the corner of her mouth. Not quite a smile, more like a glitch in her stoicism. Over the next few days, she became the ghost that haunted the halls of Outpost 9. Soldiers whispered about her. Not in fear exactly, though that was part of it, but in that strange, reverent way people talk about thunderstorms or black holes. Beautiful, powerful, not to be messed with. She doesn't blink, Ferris said once. I swear. I watched her through the monitor feed for 20 straight minutes. Not one blink. Who does that? She's an alien, Ferris. Maybe her people don't need to blink. Well, that's just weird. Kalari's quarters were on the far end of the complex, near the observation dome, a quiet location with clear views of the planet's dual moons and the drifting gas ribbons of the nebula overhead. Elias passed by once while she was standing by the glass, silhouetted against the stars. For a moment, she looked lonely. The next morning, he brought her something, a pack of Earth snacks, nothing fancy, just salted starch squares and a chocolate bar. He left them outside her door with a note that read, "Humans recommend emotional bonding via shared junk food. Please do not stab." She didn't say anything about it until 2 days later, during a joint systems diagnostic in the comms room. "These starch squares," she said with studied neutrality, "have too much sodium, but they are oddly satisfying, like chewing on edible regret." "That's the official brand slogan," Elias said solemnly. "Edible regret, now with extra salt." Again, the flicker of something behind her eyes. Not quite a smile, but warmer somehow. They were beginning to understand each other. Not perfectly, not even fluently, but in those small, tentative steps that felt like learning to walk in zero gravity. Awkward, bumpy, kind of hilarious, kind of beautiful. And still, Elias hadn't figured out why she never looked directly into a mirror, or why she stiffened whenever someone praised her combat reports, or why she had paused, just for half a second, when a young cadet had called her striking. He would learn, just not yet. The truth of Kailari's silence lived beneath her skin, beneath the smooth armor and honed edge of her words. And someday soon he'd stumble across it, probably while holding a snack in one hand and a very poorly timed compliment in the other. But for now, there were patrols to walk, sectors to scan, and sarcastic comments to lob at a woman who might or might not be considering his assassination, depending on the day. Peace was strange like that, and strangely worth it. The briefing room on Outpost 9 was a study in architectural compromise. 1 part military utility, 2 parts low-budget intergalactic IKEA, and just enough flickering wall screens to make every meeting feel like it might break into interpretive dance at any moment. Captain Elias Reese sat in the second most uncomfortable chair, sipping his 4th cup of something he insisted was coffee, but which Kalari had classified as a thermal solvent masquerading as a beverage. Across the room, she stood like a specter in steel, arms crossed, leaning just enough against the wall to suggest she was humoring the humans, not participating with them. Her long ears twitched faintly now and then, a Varelian cue Elias was learning to interpret as mild irritation, or perhaps the alien equivalent of a yawn. "Remind me again," Kalari said, slicing the air with her words, "why humans deliver intelligence reports using 37 slides of poorly animated diagrams." Lieutenant Ferris, who was leading the presentation, swallowed hard and quickly skipped ahead to the explosive anomalies slide, which at least had some pretty colors, and a warning icon that blinked in what he hoped was a threatening rhythm. "It helps our team visualize tactical flow and response protocols," Elias offered, kicking his boots up onto the table, because someone had to lower the room's dignity back to breathable levels. "Also, our military budget prioritizes flashy graphics over actual armor integrity. We have priorities." Kalari arched one long brow. "Your priorities appear to include tripping over your own strategy maps." "That was one time," he protested. "And the table was shiny." Her crystalline eyes didn't blink. "So was the floor. And the wall. And the window you accidentally dove through." There was a pause. Even Ferris stopped clicking the remote. "I maintain," Elias said, "that it was a tactical demonstration of emergency evacuation techniques." Kalari's ear twitched. After the briefing, which ended with several confused grunts, a dropped stylus, and one very unconvincing promise to review slide transitions, Elias found Kalari outside in the base's pseudo-garden. It wasn't really a garden, more like a small hydroponic experiment gone rogue, but someone had dragged a bench into the middle of it and decided it counted. Kalari sat there, surrounded by leafy green things that occasionally shivered on their own, her eyes distant, watching something far beyond the atmosphere. He sat beside her without asking. She didn't move, but she didn't stab him either, so that counted as progress. "You don't like the briefings," he said. "They offend my brain," she said flatly. "Well, that's what happens when your species develops starships before PowerPoint." "PowerPoint?" she echoed like it was a weaponized term. "Ancient Earth software, used primarily by middle managers and war criminals." A pause, then, like a thread unraveling, Kalari released something that might have been a chuckle. It was soft, so soft Elias almost missed it, but there was no mistaking the upward tilt of her mouth, the flicker of amusement hiding in her voice. "I still don't understand you," she said. "You're chaos." "Charming chaos," he corrected. "No," she said, "just chaos." He grinned. "I'll take what I can get." The sunlight on Terrace 4 had a strange quality to it, filtered through twin moons, refracted by atmospheric ice crystals. It cast everything in a faint silver glow, as if the world had been dipped in moonlight and left out to dry. It made Kailari's skin gleam like stardust. Not that Elias noticed much. Okay, he noticed. But he also noticed she flinched every time someone called her commanding or statuesque. And she'd practically teleported away the first time someone said she had a strong presence. He remembered that moment clearly. A junior engineer, wide-eyed and hopelessly earnest, had complimented her combat drill with something like, "You're like a sculpture come to life." Kalari had gone rigid, not visibly offended, just still, as if someone had hit the pause button on her existence. She blinked twice, turned, and walked away without a word. Ilias didn't chase her, but later he asked, "You don't like compliments?" She hesitated, then gave him a look that could have flayed a lesser man. "They are unnecessary," she said. "Distractions, superficial praise for things I did not choose. Like looking terrifying? Like looking wrong." That last word echoed longer than he expected. Now in the garden, he glanced sideways at her. The light caught in the small crystal ridge along her collarbone. It wasn't symmetrical, not quite. A slightly jagged edge, as if something had cracked once and healed imperfectly. "Do you miss your home?" he asked gently. "Not really," she said. "I miss the sky. I miss gravity being predictable. I miss silence." "You're in luck," he said. "Everyone here is too afraid to talk to you." Her gaze slid to him. "You're not." "Yeah, I'm not that bright." Something passed between them then. An understanding, unspoken and fragile, like the moment before starlight breaks the edge of a planet. Later that evening, Kailari approached him in the mess hall. She carried a small triangular object, wrapped in something that looked suspiciously like algae. "This is for you," she said. He stared at it. "Is it edible?" "Technically." "Is it dangerous?" "Definitely." He grinned. "You're really coming around on this whole friendship thing." She tilted her head. "This is a Varelian bonding gift. We exchange toxic pastries with those we respect." "Toxic?" She nodded solemnly. "If your organs begin to liquefy, tell me. I have a suppressant." "Well," he said, "that's the nicest thing anyone said to me all week." And she laughed. Fully, freely, just once. It was a strange sound, half silver, half fire, but it was real. That night, in his quarters, Elias stared at the not-quite-edible triangle on his desk and wondered when, exactly, he'd stopped thinking of Kailari as the alien emissary and started thinking of her as Kailari. The answer, of course, was obvious. Sometime between the PowerPoint and the toxic pastry. And something told him this was only the beginning. For the first time since arriving at Outpost 9, Kailari initiated contact. She didn't burst through a door with blade drawn or request access to the planetary defense grid, both of which Elias considered likely scenarios, but instead appeared at his office doorway like a silent judgment wearing armor. Elias looked up from his desk, where he was attempting to fix a broken comm unit with a fork and something labeled synthetic epoxy, probably non-toxic. Kalari tilted her head slightly. "Your maintenance methods are unconventional. I prefer innovative." He squinted at the unit. "It's a little-known Earth technique called winging it. You've probably heard of it in myths." "I have," she said. "It often ends in death. Only when done incorrectly." She didn't smile, but her ear twitched again. In that way, he now understood to mean mild amusement, possibly at your expense. It was practically affection coming from her. I require your presence in the observatory, she said. Am I being inducted into a secret Varelian cult? Number, there will be no cloaks or rituals, just a malfunction. That's a shame, Elias said, grabbing his jacket. I've always looked good in a cloak. Makes me feel dramatic, mysterious, slightly cold. When they reached the observatory, the malfunction in question turned out to be less an issue of broken equipment and more one of confusion. Kalari had been attempting to recalibrate the star mapping module and had, somehow, reset the entire system to Earth-centric coordinates. The holographic dome above them now displayed constellations from human mythology. Orion loomed overhead, accompanied by the twinkling outlines of Taurus and a truly absurd depiction of Sagittarius that Elias suspected had been designed by someone with a horse fetish. Kalari stared up at the glowing lines in mild horror. What is that? Ah, Elias said. That's Sagittarius. Half man, half horse. Likes archery. Hates pants. She blinked slowly. And this helps your people navigate? Not really, he admitted. It just makes us feel important when we're lost. Kalari circled the projection, arms crossed, as if interrogating it with her posture alone. Your mythology is inefficient. Accurate, he said, but colorful. He tapped a few keys and the hologram zoomed in on one particular star, a bright blue dwarf he recognized from an old training route. That one, Zeta 57, was our rendezvous point during the War of Ikran. Ever been? Kalari didn't answer at first. She stood very still, her face shadowed in starlight. When she finally spoke, her voice was low. My people called it the Morning Star. Elias glanced at her. Sounds ominous. It is where we suffered our first major loss. A whole fleet. Gone in minutes. There was a pause, the kind that stretched between two people standing on either side of a chasm they hadn't realized was there. I was there, she added softly. He didn't know what to say. Not I'm sorry. Too small. Not we all lost people. Too impersonal. Instead, he nudged the console until the stars shifted again, zooming out until the galaxy unfolded like a silver spiral above them. We call it the Milky Way, he said. Kalari narrowed her eyes. You named your galaxy after a dairy product? We were hungry and our naming committee was mostly poets and cows. A faint huff of air escaped her, close enough to a laugh that he took it as a win. She walked to the edge of the platform and stared up at the stars as if searching for something she hadn't decided she wanted to find. Why do humans do that? She asked. Look up. Because looking down usually means you've dropped something. I'm being serious. So am I. I've lost a lot of sandwiches that way. She exhaled sharply through her nose, a sound that might have been a smothered chuckle. Then more quietly, it's strange. I trained my whole life for war. Now that it's over, I don't know what to do with peace. Most of us just fake it and hope no one notices. Is that what you do? Elias hesitated. I think I just try to make it easier for someone else, one day at a time. Kalari was silent for a while. Then, I was told I was designed for intimidation. My presence is meant to unsettle, to project strength. You're pretty unsettling, he said lightly, but you also gave me a toxic pastry once, so I figure we're even. Her gaze flicked toward him. You still have it? Of course, it's framed above my bunk, under glass, like a relic, very sacred. That earned him a definite twitch of her mouth, her version of a grin. They stayed like that for a while, side by side, surrounded by ancient starlight and the soft hum of machinery. The kind of quiet that wasn't awkward or heavy, just the absence of noise where two minds agreed to rest. Kalari, he said suddenly, has anyone ever told you you're beautiful? It was a simple question. He meant it simply, but it landed like a meteor. She froze. Not dramatically, not visibly stiff, just still, as if her entire body had suspended animation. Her breath stopped. Her eyes didn't blink. Even her ears held their exact angle, caught mid-twitch. Elias looked at her, confused. Hey, you okay? Still nothing. Her fingers were curled slightly, as though she'd half started to reach for a weapon and then thought better of it. Her mouth parted slightly, but no sound came out. Elias took a careful step forward. Kalari? And finally, after what felt like years stretched into seconds, she said, "That word is not for me." "What, beautiful?" "Yes." "Why not?" "Because it is for soft things, fragile things. I am not soft. I am not—" She stopped. Her voice cracked, just slightly. He stepped beside her again, voice quiet now. "You're strong. You're smart. You're terrifying when provoked. But none of that disqualifies you from being beautiful. It just makes it more interesting." She stared at him, not with suspicion or amusement or even judgment, just stunned disbelief. "You really think that?" "I really do." For a moment, the only sound was the hum of the observatory and the far-off whisper of the ventilation system trying not to collapse. Then Kailari said, with a voice so faint it barely escaped her lips, "I do not know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," he replied. And she didn't. She just stood there, surrounded by constellations she didn't understand, beside a man who saw something she'd never dared believe was there. It was perhaps the most human thing she had ever done. The next morning began with an explosion, which was not, strictly speaking, unusual on Outpost 9. What was unusual was that it came from the base's culinary wing. Elias Reese sprinted through the hallway wearing only one boot, his jacket flapping like a superhero who hadn't fully committed to the role. Alarms were chirping, not blaring, because the system had apparently decided this particular explosion didn't qualify for full panic. Perhaps it had learned to triage after the accidental gravity inversion incident the week before. He skidded into the mess hall, half expecting to find scorched ceilings or a crater in the middle of the synthetic tile floor. What he found instead was Kalari, standing in a fog of burnt vapor, her long ears perked and her usually expressionless face wearing something suspiciously like guilt. Behind her, the food synthesis unit was sputtering. One of its panels had come loose and was hanging like a shocked eyelid. Something inside it sparked and hissed. "I was experimenting," she said. Ilias blinked at her. "With what? Thermonuclear pancakes?" "Varelian morning cake. I thought it would be a gesture of cultural exchange." "Kailari, that machine is only rated for basic Earth ingredients. Anything beyond salt, protein powder, or disappointment causes system instability. I used your cinnamon." He moved closer, squinting at the blackened tray she held in both hands like a sacrificial offering. "That doesn't look like cinnamon. That looks like regret baked at 800 Kelvin. Kailari's ears dipped. "I may have misunderstood the ratio." "What ratio did you use?" 2 parts flour, 1 part hydrogenated sugar compound, 6 parts cinnamon." Elias whistled. "Well, I admire your commitment to the spice economy." She offered him a charred slice. It let off a faint hiss as he took it. Something about it shimmered like it was still alive, or maybe trying to become sentient. "I'm going to need hazard pay," he muttered, but he bit into it anyway. He chewed, slowly, thoughtfully. A strange warmth began to bloom in his chest, and then his left eyebrow twitched. A second later, he sneezed, violently, and shot a short burst of flame from his nose. Kailari's eyes widened. "Is that supposed to happen?" Elias coughed, fanned his face, then wiped his nose with a sleeve already stained with engine grease and at least one unexplainable purple smear. "Well," he rasped, "I can breathe better than I have in years." She stared at him, half appalled. "I will recalibrate the recipe." "Don't you dare," he said, eyes watering. "This may be the most exciting breakfast I've ever had." A silence settled, broken only by the food unit's continued mechanical weeping and a small fire someone finally remembered to extinguish. Elias sat at one of the scorched tables, waving a spoon through the air like a conductor directing invisible music. "You know," he said, "most people wouldn't go to these lengths to fit in." Kalari stood rigid beside him. "I am not trying to fit in. You blew up breakfast for me. That's practically love in some cultures. Your species is absurd." "Thank you. We work very hard at it." Kailari sat slowly across from him, her movements careful. He noticed that today she wore a different armor set, not as heavy, with fewer rigid plates and more flexible mesh around the shoulders. Her long ears twitched slightly, but didn't lay flat like they usually did in groups. She seemed looser, not relaxed exactly. She was still Kailari, but something had shifted. I have been thinking, she said. Elias raised a brow. Always dangerous. I don't want to be terrifying. He blinked. Come again? She looked down at the remains of her culinary war crime. Every compliment I've ever received before came with qualifiers. Imposing, dominant, majestic in the way a collapsing sun is majestic. Elias snorted. That last one's actually kind of poetic. I believe that was all I could be. That softness was weakness. That beauty belonged to others, to the humans with their symmetrical faces and ridiculous hair rituals. I take personal offense to that. My hair ritual is deeply spiritual. But when you said those words to me, you are very beautiful, I did not know how to hold them. You froze, Elias said gently. Yes, she admitted, because I had never been given something like that without expectation or mockery. He leaned back, letting her words settle in the space between them. I meant it, he said. Still do. You are reckless. Occupational hazard. You are sincere. That one's newer. They sat in silence again, a more comfortable one now. The kind shared by people who had crossed a threshold neither fully understood, but both recognized. A low chime interrupted them. Elias tapped his comlink. Reese here. Captain, came Ferris's voice. We've got a problem in the outer ring. Some kind of spatial distortion just blinked into existence near the perimeter. Might want to take a look. Elias sighed. Is it a dangerous kind of distortion or a makes the lights flicker and gives people headaches kind of distortion? Unclear, sir, but it's humming. Everything hums out here. This one's humming in Varelian. Elias froze. So did Kailari. I'll be right there, Elias said. He stood quickly, eyes meeting Kailari's. You coming? Of course, she said, rising to her full height. As they walked briskly toward the perimeter, Elias glanced sideways at her. So, what exactly does a humming Varelian distortion sound like? She gave him a sideways glance. Mostly like one of our war chants, but reversed, in a minor key. Well, that's not terrifying at all. And, she added, it only hums if it senses you watching. He stopped. I hate that. Correct response. The distortion was waiting at the edge of Outpost 9's perimeter shield, flickering like a vertical tear in reality. It shimmered in and out, occasionally revealing glimpses of something not entirely aligned with the physical laws of this dimension. And it was humming, not loudly but persistently, a low, echoing, melodic pattern that sounded like a lullaby for ancient machines. Elias narrowed his eyes. So, are we looking at a wormhole? A portal? A really pretentious mirror? Kalari didn't answer. Her posture was tight, her ears angled sharply. What is it? He asked. She inhaled slowly. It's Varelian, but old, very old, from before my time, before the wars. Elias studied her. Is that good or bad? She answered in a whisper. I don't know yet. Then the distortion pulsed, and something stepped out. It stepped through the distortion like someone emerging from a hot shower. Graceful, eerie, and slightly too casual for something that just defied the laws of space-time. The thing that entered was vaguely humanoid, clad in dark, iridescent armor that shimmered in a way Elias's brain couldn't quite categorize. Its limbs were proportionate but slightly elongated, like someone had stretched a normal body just past the boundary of comfort. And from its head extended two long, upward-pointing ears. Okay, Elias said quietly. Either that's your cousin, or this is about to get very awkward. Kalari didn't answer. Her eyes were locked on the figure, her stance a perfect blend of defensive and disbelieving. The being took a few steps forward and then stopped just shy of the shield perimeter, where the air sizzled softly from the lingering distortion. Its eyes, silver and angular, focused directly on Kalari. Then it spoke, and its voice was a slow cascade of syllables that shifted between frequencies. It wasn't just talking, it was resonating. Elias winced. Is it just me, or did that sound like someone auto-tuned a thunderstorm? Kalari stepped forward. It is speaking an archaic form of High Varelian. Great, Elias muttered. We're being invaded by a Shakespearean version of your species. Kalari replied in the same layered language, her words smooth and tight. The figure tilted its head, responding, and suddenly Kailari tensed. "What's it saying?" Elias asked. Kailari turned slightly, her expression unreadable. "It says it's from the fracture, the time before our planet unified. It claims to be a sentinel." "Sentinel as in guardian of ancient secrets or highly trained space assassin?" "Both." "Awesome." The sentinel raised a hand and pressed it gently against the barrier. The shield shimmered but didn't let it through. It watched Kailari with eerie calm, then spoke again. Kailari's jaw tightened. "It's requesting access to the outpost. Says it has a message for the last blood of the first spiral." Elias blinked. "That's you, isn't it?" "Inconveniently, yes." "I guess that makes you royalty?" She gave him a withering glance. "Only if your royal line includes war orphans raised in cryobarracks." "Technically, yes. We call them noble disasters." She turned back to the sentinel and said something that made the air vibrate like someone had plucked a cosmic string. The sentinel responded, and the distortion shimmered again, widening slightly, its edges unstable. Ferris's voice crackled in over the comms. "Sir, that anomaly's expanding. Should we reinforce the perimeter?" "No," Elias said, "but prepare for a weird guest." "I'm always prepared for weird," Ferris replied. "I work with you." The distortion hiccuped once, then closed completely, leaving the sentinel standing on solid ground inside the perimeter, calm as a vacationing librarian. It bowed, not a deep one, more like the kind of nod you'd give an equal. Kailari returned it. "Well," Elias muttered, "hope he's not allergic to cinnamon." They brought the sentinel to the command chamber, where it stood in silence, inspecting the room with the kind of slow, curious gaze usually reserved for museum artifacts or abandoned civilizations. Its armor remained sealed, but now faint blue lines pulsed along its chest plate, like a heartbeat encoded in circuit traces. Kailari approached it again, speaking in their shared tongue. This time, the conversation was longer. Her voice dropped occasionally, then rose in disbelief. Elias didn't understand the words, but he recognized the rhythm of an argument that was rapidly shifting into a revelation. Finally, Kailari turned back to Elias, her face pale. "It says I was not born by chance," she said, "that I was part of a contingency, a long-dormant protocol designed in the event our world ever forgot what balance meant." "That's ominous." "I thought I was just a soldier, a tool, but apparently I was bred for something more." "Let me guess," Elias said. "Galactic prophecy, secret bloodline, mysterious destiny. Check, check, check." "I do not wish to be part of a prophecy." "No one ever does, except maybe actors, and possibly doomsday cultists." The sentinel spoke again, its voice lower now, carrying less resonance and more weight. Kailari listened, nodding slowly. "It says something is waking," she translated. "A rift in the fold, a resurgence of the old powers, the ones that split the Virelians before the fracture. It claims I must journey with it to the core temple, that only there can I unlock what remains of our origin code." Elias folded his arms. "And what if we say no?" Kailari's expression didn't change, but her eyes softened. "Then it will wait until I am ready, or until I die." "Charming." She glanced at him. "You do not have to come." "Oh, I definitely do," Elias said. "You think I'm passing up a chance to visit a mystical alien temple? That's practically on my bucket list. Your list includes exploding pastries and death cults. Don't forget interstellar karaoke night." Kailari blinked. "That was not karaoke. That was a Virelian vocal battle right." "You sang at a bounty hunter until he cried, Kailari. That counts." For a brief second, her mouth twitched at the corner again. It was becoming more frequent now, that little spark of humor, like a fire learning how to catch. Elias turned back to the sentinel. "So, if we go with you, we're not walking into a trap, right?" The sentinel didn't answer. "That's not a great sign." Kailari exhaled slowly. "They don't lie, but they don't reveal everything either, not unless they deem you worthy." Elias nodded. "Good. Then let's earn it. Let's find out why the universe put a cinnamon-loving war orphan and a sarcastic human together in the same crumbling outpost." Kailari glanced down at the floor, where the soft hum of the sentinel's presence vibrated through the structure like a whisper from the past. "I never believed I was more than a weapon," she said. Elias smiled. "You're wrong, you know." She looked up. You're the story the weapon never got to tell. And somewhere deep inside the Sentinel, something pulsed twice, once for recognition and once for permission. The shuttle was barely holding together, which Elias considered a promising start. It was a sleek thing once, back before time, cosmic dust storms, and a particularly bad docking incident with a rogue mining drone had taken turns turning it into what he now affectionately referred to as the jalopy of destiny. The exterior was patched with alloys that didn't quite match. The port thruster had a personality of its own, a difficult one, and the onboard AI was fluent in sarcasm, but occasionally forgot basic arithmetic. Still, it was their ride to the core temple, and they weren't exactly spoiled for choice. Elias strapped into the pilot seat and tapped a few controls. Okay, systems check. Life support? Functioning, Kalari replied, seated beside him, with her usual military precision. Mostly, Elias squinted. Mostly? Enough to sustain us unless we engage in vigorous dance battles. Well, there go my plans for the zero-G salsa routine. The Sentinel, who still had not given them a name or even a hobby, stood at the back of the ship in silent contemplation. It hadn't moved in hours, and Elias was beginning to suspect it was solar-powered. So, he said, gesturing vaguely toward it, our glowy friend back there, is it going to participate or just haunt us quietly the whole trip? Kalari didn't glance back. It is meditating, preparing. For what? I don't know. That's what makes it unnerving. Elias nodded slowly. Yep, nothing like a mystery monk from an ancient civilization to put you at ease. The shuttle shuddered as it broke free from the outpost's gravity tether. Stars spilled into view, forming a black ocean lit with diamonds. In the distance, the fold shimmered like a bruise across space, veiled and trembling. Somewhere within that distortion lay the core temple, a construct older than recorded memory, wrapped in myth, and allegedly located inside a wandering singularity that only appeared on the anniversary of the Varelian Accord. Tell me again how we're supposed to find this place, Elias said, adjusting the trajectory. Kalari replied, the Sentinel uploaded coordinates directly into the ship's nav system. Right, and the nav system translated those into a combination of star maps, quantum pulses, and a drawing of a goat wearing a cape. It's a metaphor. Varelian symbolism is esoteric. Please don't tell me the goat is sacred. The goat is wisdom and mischief, also mild digestion. Elias blinked. This entire mission is based on constellations and digestive metaphors? Yes. Well, now I feel underdressed. Kalari actually chuckled, just once, soft and surprised, like the sound escaped her before she could catch it. Elias shot her a grin but didn't press. These days her laughter was a rare mineral, not to be extracted, but discovered. They fell into companionable silence as the stars streaked by. Elias watched her from the corner of his eye. She didn't fidget, didn't blink often, always alert, always braced for something to go wrong. It was her natural state, ready. But lately he'd noticed something different. Not softness exactly, but a shift, like the edges of her armor weren't quite as sharp. Do you believe it? He asked, breaking the quiet. She tilted her head. Believe what? That you're meant for something more. All this prophecy business. Destiny. Kalari looked out the viewport, where the fold glimmered in the distance like a promise made by something too old to remember how to lie. I don't know, she said, but I think I want to. Elias nodded. That's a start. Suddenly, alarms chirped. Not the panicked kind, yet, but the kind that suggested the universe was clearing its throat ominously. Elias scanned the readout. Gravimetric distortion dead ahead. Could be turbulence. Could be, oh wait, yep, space-time hiccup. Kalari's fingers moved over her console. The temple must be close. The fold is reacting. Outside, space began to twist. The stars stretched and smeared, pulled like taffy by invisible forces. The ship groaned, a low moan of old metal under strain. Elias adjusted course as the nav system flickered. We're getting pulled into something, he said, and I'm pretty sure it doesn't have a welcome mat. Then just as suddenly as it began, the turbulence stopped. They were no longer in normal space. They floated in a vast expanse of black. But it wasn't empty. It was still. Too still. No stars, no planets. Just void. And then it appeared, the core temple. It wasn't a structure in the traditional sense. It looked like someone had sculpted time into the shape of a spiral galaxy and folded it inward. Great arcs of crystal and metal looped around a central sphere that pulsed with a heartbeat slow enough to age empires. It wasn't spinning, but it felt like it was coiled with momentum and memory. Elias leaned forward. Well, I've officially run out of words for cool. Kalari stood. Prepare to dock. Which part is the door? Just head toward the pulse. Right, of course. Let's just fly into the magical beating heart of a sentient structure. Totally safe. The shuttle eased forward. As they neared, the outer shell of the temple shifted, not visibly but through sensation. The ship vibrated, then slowed without Elias touching a single control. Docking clamps extended from nothingness. They weren't mechanical. They were light, shaped into firm spirals that gently cradled the ship and pulled it inward. The hatch opened with a sigh. Beyond was a tunnel of luminous stone, glowing softly with veins of ancient energy. The air shimmered. Elias half expected to be turned into quantum soup. Instead, it smelled faintly of ozone and something like wildflowers. Kalari stepped out first, the sentinel following silently. Elias brought up the rear, muttering to himself. First rule of ancient temples, if it glows, don't touch it. Second rule, if it talks, don't marry it. As they walked, the walls reacted. Symbols emerged from the stone, glowing briefly before fading again. Kalari paused, brushing her fingers over one. This symbol, she murmured, it means reflection. It was part of the old teachings. Reflection like mirror, or reflection like soul-searching? Yes. They reached the central chamber, a vast hollow sphere. Floating at its heart was a crystalline construct, shaped vaguely like a tree, its branches twisting through dimensions, its roots sunk into invisible soil. Each branch glimmered with holograms, moments suspended in time, and at its base was a pedestal. Kalari approached it. The sentinel stepped aside, silent, waiting. She placed her hand on the pedestal, and the temple woke. Light flared, the branches trembled, and suddenly a dozen projections of Kalari bloomed into view. Herself, at different points in her life, as a child crying in the barracks, as a soldier, blade drawn, as a survivor, staring out into the stars. Then one more image formed, her, standing here, now looking at all the versions of herself. Elias whispered, Kalari. She didn't move, but her voice when it came was quiet. They're showing me all the ways I survived. Then the sentinel finally spoke again. For the first time, Elias could understand it directly. You were not made for war. You were made for remembrance. Kalari turned slowly, her eyes wide. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. She finally understood what she was. And Elias realized, standing there, in the impossible silence of the temple, that something fundamental had changed. Not just in her, but in the universe itself. The chamber pulsed like the lungs of a sleeping giant, slow, rhythmic, and just unsettling enough to remind Elias that ancient alien temples weren't exactly known for their safety records. The crystalline branches of the memory tree above them continued to shimmer with suspended moments, each image flickering in and out like echoes of forgotten thoughts. Kalari still stood near the pedestal, unmoving, her hand resting on it as though afraid to let go, as though doing so would break the fragile tether to something long buried inside her. All right, Elias said, adjusting his utility vest with theatrical care. I'm going to ask the obvious question now. Are we sure this place isn't going to reprogram our DNA or swap our personalities? Because I'm not emotionally prepared to be the stoic one. Kalari's lips parted into a faint smile, the sort that might vanish if acknowledged too directly. If our personalities swapped, I suspect you'd be insufferable within minutes. Hey, I'd be excellent at brooding and glaring at walls. I've had years of practice pretending to understand my taxes. The temple's light shifted, casting their shadows longer. The memory tree's branches began curling inward, a gesture so subtle and slow, it felt less like movement and more like thought made visible. The sentinel stepped forward and raised one elongated hand toward the trunk. A single line of energy extended from its palm to the crystalline bark. The tree pulsed once more, then opened. Yes, opened. The core split not violently, but like petals unfolding, revealing a hidden chamber within the tree's base. Inside, floating weightlessly in a field of gravity suspension, was a spherical artifact about the size of a human heart. It shimmered with bands of color and shapes that refused to stay consistent. One moment solid, the next transparent, the next geometrically impossible. Kailari inhaled sharply. That, she said, is the Genesis node. Elias raised a brow. That sounds important, and probably fragile. Should I fetch the ceremonial oven mitts? The sentinel nodded once. It is the code of origin. It holds the source imprint of your people's first consciousness, the convergence of form, memory, and intention. Let me guess, Elias said. You're going to plug her into it like a galactic USB stick? Kailari didn't laugh, but her eyes flicked toward him with something suspiciously close to amusement. The node responds only to bloodlines with the first spiral signature. If I interface with it, I may inherit everything. Like a cosmic inheritance from long-lost ancestors? Or a psychological collapse under the weight of millennia of culture and trauma? Sounds fun. Definitely beats paperwork. She turned back to the sphere. Her long fingers hovered near it, hesitant. Elias could see the uncertainty flickering through her posture. Not fear. Kailari didn't fear the unknown. But this wasn't battle. This was something far more disarming. Legacy. Purpose. The kind of identity that wasn't earned through survival, but through acceptance. I don't know if I want to be their echo, she said quietly. I've spent my entire life becoming something outside of them. A soldier, a weapon. Now I'm supposed to be a bridge? Elias stepped beside her. Maybe you're not their echo. Maybe you're their answer. She blinked at him, caught off guard again by his strange, infuriating optimism. The kind of hope that didn't pretend everything was fine, but insisted that it could be better. The moment stretched. Then, with a breath as steady as engineered gravity, Kailari reached forward and placed her palm against the node. The world exploded. Not physically, which was always a bonus, but mentally. Visions poured into her mind like a storm of light and emotion. She saw stars forming, planets swirling into existence. She witnessed the first spiral, the original Varelians, building cities of singing crystal and sky bridges. She felt their grief as their unity fractured, as arrogance and fear split them into warring factions. She saw herself, or rather the idea of herself, created in shadow, tucked away in cryogenic vaults, her genetics encoded with layers of protective memory that had waited, patient, for the right moment to awaken. When she pulled her hand back, the node gently floated back into the cradle of the memory tree, and the petals closed around it once more. Kailari's knees nearly buckled. Elias caught her without thinking. Okay, he said. So, full download? She nodded slowly. It's like I have lived 1,000 lives, all of them leading here. Did you at least get a user manual? She managed a breath. More like an encrypted poem with very aggressive formatting. They both looked up as the sentinel finally spoke again. You are now the archive, it said, but the node is only half of what must be restored. Oh, come on, Elias groaned. You're telling me we just climbed the mountain of mystical revelations, and now there's a sequel? There is always a sequel, Kailari said dryly. Welcome to the Varelian narrative structure. The sentinel gestured, and a star map unfolded in the air, projected directly from its armor. One glowing point pulsed on the edge of the system. There, it said, the counterpart to the archive lies in the Abyss Vault. Knowledge must be paired with memory, form with intention. If you do not complete the cycle, the reformation will fail. Elias squinted at the map. The Abyss Vault? I'm going to go out on a limb and say that's not a resort. It's a war tomb, Kailari said. A prison for the fragmented minds of those who tore the first spiral apart. Elias exhaled. Of course it is. Just once, I want the next step of the mission to be a tropical island and a free drink voucher. Kailari straightened fully now, composure returning. We'll go, but we'll go prepared. As they turned back toward the shuttle, the temple began to dim. Not dying, just resting again, as if its long-held breath could finally be exhaled. The tree's branches receded into stillness. The node was safe. The memory had been passed. And Kailari walked a little taller. I don't know what's waiting in that vault, Elias said as they boarded the ship again. Neither do I, Kalari replied. But this time, I don't go as just a soldier. She looked at him, long ears catching the low glow of the temple's parting light. I go as someone who remembers. Elias nodded, buckling in again. And I, he said, go as the designated comic relief and part-time shuttle mechanic. The ship rose. The temple vanished behind them. Ahead, the fold rippled, and the stars waited with bated breath. The approach to the abyss vault wasn't subtle. Wrapped in layers of gravitational distortion and cloaked in a nebula that looked like someone spilled ink into a lightning storm, the vault hovered just outside the fold's reach. It didn't orbit anything, didn't rotate, didn't even pretend to follow the laws of physics like a respectable celestial object. It was simply there, waiting, timeless. Elias stared at it from the shuttle's viewport, arms crossed, chewing the edge of a protein bar that had lied to him about being apple cinnamon. All right, he muttered. If I were an ancient galactic storage locker full of insane ghost data, that's exactly where I'd hide. Kalari stood behind him, her gaze steady on the vault. She no longer wore the same armor she'd worn when they met. It had been replaced with something lighter, made of an iridescent alloy gifted by the core temple. It shimmered faintly with embedded memory conduits, allowing her to interface with ancient Varelian tech at will. And it also happened to be immune to tomato sauce, as they discovered during an unfortunate experiment with vacuum-sealed spaghetti. I can feel them already, she said. The fractured minds. They're loud. The sentinel, still as a statue in the corner, finally moved. They are not ghosts. They are echoes, raw fragments of the first spiral's last war, sealed here so their grief and rage could not spread. Elias sighed. Fantastic. Screaming digital echo fragments. That's way better than the haunted jellyfish I was imagining. Kailari glanced at him, amusement glinting in her otherwise solemn expression. You have a vivid imagination. Thanks. I also have a strict no-possession policy, so if anything tries to crawl into my brain, I'm jumping out the nearest airlock. They docked at the vault's entrance, a jagged tear in reality shaped like a sideways hourglass. The interior was deceptively peaceful. Long hallways spiraled in impossible geometries, where doors opened not with keys but with intent. Time ticked differently here, less a march, more a curious shuffle. At the vault's core was the crucible, a convergence chamber where the fractured consciousnesses were stored. It looked like a cracked star had been caught mid-collapse and frozen in a cage of obsidian wires. Energy rippled from it in pulses that sounded eerily like breathing. Elias squinted at it. So, is it going to talk, or just menace us with vague symbolism? Before anyone could answer, the crucible shimmered. And then, from within, emerged flickering shapes. Faces, voices, distorted versions of Kailari herself. Not clones, reflections. The pieces she might have become had history twisted differently. One of them stepped forward, taller, her eyes cold and calculating, armor blackened with scorch marks. You are the archive, she said. You should not exist. I do, Kailari said calmly, and I'm here to finish what you couldn't. Another voice joined in, this one broken, voice trembling with raw fear. We were betrayed. We lost everything. You were afraid, Kailari said. You let that fear control you. That's not strength. A third stepped forward, quiet, eyes gentle. And you? What have you become? Kailari lifted her chin. I've become more than what they designed me to be. I've seen the stars without fear. I've fought, yes, but I've also learned. Laughed. Her eyes flicked to Elias. Even danced. Badly. I have video proof, Elias muttered, mostly to himself. The crucible pulsed again, harder this time. The vault began to quake slightly, as though unsure whether to accept or reject her presence. You must choose, said the cold one. Seal us away forever, or integrate us. Bear all we were, even the worst of it. Kailari didn't hesitate. You are part of me, whether I like it or not. I won't deny you, but I will define me, not you. She stepped forward, hand outstretched. The echoes surged forward, but didn't attack. They flowed into her, merging into her presence, like colors bleeding into light. Her armor flared, absorbing the crucible's energy. And then, just like that, the chaos quieted. The vault stopped shaking. The crucible dimmed, and Kalari stood alone, no longer fractured, no longer haunted, whole. Elias blinked. So, that was terrifying and awesome. You okay? She turned toward him, her face calm. And something else. Something Elias hadn't seen in her before. Not like this. Peace. I think I finally understand what beauty is, she said. Oh? And here I thought it was all about cheekbones and cheeky banter. She smiled, walking toward him. Number, it's being known, and still being seen as worthy, even if you're different. You were always worthy, he said without flinching. She stopped. There it was again. That look, that pause, that same stillness he remembered from when he'd first told her she was beautiful, and she'd frozen, like the universe itself had hiccuped in surprise. Only this time, she didn't freeze. She stepped closer. You said that before, she whispered. I meant it. She leaned in, her voice low and dry as a desert breeze. Say it again, soldier. You're very beautiful, he said, smiling. Kailari smirked. That's better. They exited the vault with the sentinel in tow, the crucible now quiet behind them, its burden lifted. The stars outside welcomed them back like familiar friends. Back aboard the shuttle, Elias slid into the pilot's seat and cracked his knuckles. So, galactic reset button flipped, trauma archive tamed, legacy embraced. What's next for the last archive of the first spiral? Kailari looked out the viewport, watching the fold ripple like silken wind. Rebuilding, she said. Maybe even a future. Oh, good, Elias said, activating the engines. Because I have ideas. Step 1, universal healthcare. Step 2, planetary pizza delivery. Step 3, stop talking. But it's a solid... Seriously, stop. As the stars stretched around them and the ship leapt into the fold, Elias leaned back in his chair, grinning like an idiot. And Kailari, the once feared warrior of a forgotten people, let out a soft, unmistakable sound. A laugh. Not forced, not bitter. Real. And in that small, bright sound, somewhere between past and future, between soldier and archive, was the beautiful truth of everything they'd become.